1. Faded Clown. Ledgecarp is bored, splayed over his purple bedclothes in a disorganized manner reminiscent of a gangly rag doll. Maddie lies across his legs, sound asleep, her white breasts rising and falling softly. Another man might have congratulated himself, but Carp was an explorer who, after mapping every crevice on a mountain, needed a new challenge and had outgrown the hobby. His eyes wandered to the orange walls plastered with trophies of his victories, and dozens of framed newspaper articles detailing past triumphs and failures which had gained the sweetness of nostalgia. Carp was merely 40, although general opinion maintained he had reached his zenith. Carp agreed. Restless, he runs his fingers through wavy hair dry from years of chemicals, as his long face. The clock on the shelf shows 1:30 a.m. Without a second of consideration, he withdraws his feet from under Maddie's head and slips off the bed, ignores the clothes left on the floor, and tromps to the closet. The bed springs creak as Maddie sits up, her bewilderment seeping into his back as he pulls a green shirt over his bony shoulders. "What?" she asks. "Did something happen?" "I'm bored," comes his flat answer as he snakes into some plain blue pants. "Come back to bed." She rubs the covers invitingly. Carp has found a tie. His love of nice outfits had not faded. As he ties the strip of cloth, rather than look at Maddie only to remember the fiery girl she used to be, he scans his wall of fame. "A hero has died today," reads the central newspaper clipping, a headline printed 15 years ago. The paragraph underneath burned on his mind, the relish of its first reading a memory of a memory. "Crime clown escapes after brutal slaying." It was one of the last papers printed. Someone had hung the publisher the next day from the iconic sign over his building. Not Carp. He had held a high regard for Johnson Black's tenacity. No one criticized the New Order these days. No one called them villains to their faces. There were no honest newspapers left, and the vast slave population of the planet had no use for real news anyway. But complaining was no good. The way the New Order ran things left Carp to himself most of the time. But there was too much time and no mountains. "Come back to bed," Maddie reiterates. But Carp has grabbed his coat. "I think I'll go for a drive. Alone," he adds when Maddie starts to rise. "Don't wait up," he blurts as he shuts the door behind him, and Maddie slumps like a withered flower. Carp's garage houses 6 vehicles, all shiny, bright sports cars tuned to perfection. After a moment of half-hearted comparison, he slides behind the wheel of a monstrous blue and pink convertible, keys still in the ignition. As he waits for the metal door to slide open, he glances at an older vehicle in the corner, all purple, the unrepaired dent in the front bumper incongruous with the pristine condition of its neighbors, as though the damage were a sacred memento. Carp winces at the unsavory taste provoked by the sight of it, and grinds the accelerator to the floor, leaving another patch on the concrete. Carp directs his overpowered vehicle through Old Town, where he had made his mark in the days prior to the great victory. He found the main city outside too orderly. After beating Atlas Man, Alexander Corman had remodeled most of it in his image. This meant symmetry, dark tones, function, a great number of statues of the good Dr. Corman, and no fun anywhere. Before the last hero's body was cold, the big villains had divided the world into territories where things ran according to their own laws. Districts within these states had been doled out to the minor crooks and scoundrels who possessed less impressive powers or, as was the case with Carp, no powers at all. He could have asked to be set up in Paris or Prague. In the old days, he had promised Maddie they'd paint the Eiffel Tower with a rainbow. But when the time came, he had just asked for Brooklyn, now called Old Town. He'd battled Foxman for its soul countless times and won in the end. In the first year after the victory, Karp had immersed himself into giving his conquest a complete facelift. Every statue had been painted with a smile, the pictures in the galleries defaced, the libraries burned, and every building made over in a mix of gaudy colors. Clubs and bars shut down by Foxman were reopened, and the whole area became a collage of painted people and a cacophony of loud music soon known as Clown Town. Karp, as the new mayor, officially christened it so. But as with his various fairgrounds of death in his criminal days, Clowntown was meaningless without Foxman to challenge it, a game with no playmate to give it life. Over the years, the paint had faded. Ruts cut by the rain showed the old bones underneath, until everything was stone gray once again. Karp gave no orders to change anything, and no one complained. Most of the residents were folks too scared to move away, or else his old gang members. In any case, the title Clown Town had given way to Old Town years ago, as Brooklyn was the only borough of old New York with some semblance of its old self. Without thinking, he had guided his car right to the smiling cone, its mascot grinning at him from the neon sign amid the gray concrete cliffs as if inviting him in, a glowing relic of Clown Town. He recognized every car in the lot and knew what waited for him. That after leaving his blue and pink monster across 3 parking spots, he would saunter into a blast of greetings from a mob of familiar crooked smiles and extended hands and backslaps from the gang he had released after the victory. Fat and happy on cocaine and hookers. Maybe there would be some out of town kid, a young enforcer from one of the vast slave farms outside the city, stammering at the sight of the legendary crime clown, and Karp might indulge the room by lighting a cigarette in his pink holder and telling some old stories in his high clown voice for an audience as familiar with them as he. Karp had lost track of how many rounds he had bought for the house in the last 15 years, or how many times he'd relived the last battle and had to hold back the threatening choke in his voice when he reached the moment when he killed Foxman, while scrutinized by sycophants clinging to every word. The old voice and the cigarette holder were just things he pulled out on those occasions. The drinks and cigarettes were bland, the voice tiresome, and he did not consider the last encounter with Foxman a battle at all. Nevertheless, he periodically succumbed to the pull of cheap salutations at the smiling cone, leaving at dawn wearing his old smile only to let it fall the minute he had closed the door of his car. He drives on, leaving the smiling neon in the darkness. Farther on, he comes to the old walls of the Anderson Correctional Facility, running parallel with the road. Renamed the Paper Prison, it had become a popular tourist attraction for those who can still afford to travel. Karp sighs as he passes the gap in the wall blasted during the last escape. Sometimes it had seemed the cycle of breaking out and being tossed back in with a black eye would last forever. He had met Maddie there, too. She had walked in full of self-importance and come out with her mind thoroughly on his leash, his most rabid follower. He drives on. It's 2:57 a.m. Maddie would probably wait for him until 3 or 4 in the morning. An odd sense of loyalty or responsibility prevented him from getting rid of her. After all, he had turned her into a criminal. Besides, she was one of the last links to the old days. All the same, he does not want to deal with the sniveling companion she had become. Karp steers his car along a too familiar route and stops at the mouth of an alley where he steps out and scrapes at the pavement with his alligator shoes. The dark bloodstain had vanished years ago, but he still sees it in the outline of a corpse in white chalk carefully preserved by his own orders, for the sake of curious visitors and as a monument to his victory. At least, that was what Carp had always answered. Foxman's corpse had been bagged and thrown into the city dump with the other heroes. At the time, Carp had not felt a shred of sentiment or sympathy. Still didn't. But a sort of nostalgia overtook him from time to time, and this alley was the closest thing Foxman had to a grave, and the chalk mark his only epitaph. Carp sinks against the wall. Rain washed away paint or stains. Memory and stone are harder to erase. 15 years, he says slowly, drawing out each syllable. It's so boring now, Foxy. Images float around Carp, grainy and faded, of a man in a brown cape and cowl decorated with long ears and narrow eye slits reflecting the wily fox he was. Carp is there too, or at least someone who resembles him in gaudy suits and clown makeup, who laughs hysterically while fighting with the caped man in elaborate carnivalesque set pieces, sometimes alone, sometimes aided by a slim girl, Maddie, with a ferocious snarl as she wields a massive hammer or shotgun. Sometimes there is a collection of hostages, perhaps one snared from Foxman's extended family of law-loving, animal-themed allies, hanging suspended over a vat of chemicals in the backdrop. Had Fox really deserved such a death? After all the time Carp had invested in breaking him, trying to compromise his code of honor and justice, ramming him in the dark was a cheat, an unsavory shortcut, and the quiet of the empty, unchallenging years was deafening. This chalk mark, and a dented bumper, the only things left to remind him of Foxman. 15 years. In a way, you were the closest thing I had to a friend, never disappointing me even though you killed all my punchlines. Right until the end. Not so sure I really won that last fight, after all. When Carp finally goes back to his car, his phone is vibrating furiously on the passenger seat, where he must have forgotten it last night. Alexander Corman, Dr. Dredd himself, had been calling him for an hour. An hour? Carp answers it immediately. "Where have you been?" Corman demands. Carp feigns stupidity. "Oh, have you been trying to reach me? So sorry." Corman does not sound the least bit convinced. "Return to the castle at once. I've ordered an emergency meeting." Corman hangs up. Carp tosses the phone back onto the seat in a small act of defiance. The castle was across the river in Manhattan. Why on earth is Corman calling a meeting at 4:59 a.m.? With a last glance at the dim alley, Carp speeds away.